morning, good afternoon, good evening. The pushback by G40, this is the faction of Zanu PF that was booted out of power following the 2017 military coup, started in earnest. Their position, of course, has been bolstered by the reality on the ground. Mnangagwa has failed to deliver any meaningful economic recovery 8 years since the coup. I think it's made the situation even worse by coming out with the outrageous claim that he was going to pull the country, which is now a failed state, one of the poorest countries in the world. He was going to turn it around and make it an upper middle income country by the year 2030. Nonsense, of course. And thanks to Blessed Geza and his four amigos, who in January came out right and the courage to go on a public media and publicly pronounce that Mnangagwa's claim of Vision 2030 was bullshit. Of course, it was bullshit. Nearly 50% of Zimbabweans are today living in abject poverty. And the country's economic situation is getting worse and worse by the day. His 8 years in office since the coup have changed nothing. If anything at all, corruption and mismanagement have gone into overdrive. So Vision 2030 was a mirage. And Blessed Gezi and others have told Mnangagwa to his face that it is a mirage, that he should resign. Blessed Gezi, turns out, belongs to this faction that supports VP Chiwenga to take over from Mnangagwa. I don't know whether it's by arrangement or just by coincidence. This seems to be the preferred candidate of the other key G40 players. And one of them is Professor Jonathan Moyo. He was Zanu PF self-appointed chief of propaganda during Mugabe's time. And his views are widely read and valued, particularly within Zanu PF circles. And in his latest X posting, or rather one of his latest one, he's talking of the requiem for change with continuity. There are some who of late have been falling on each other, peddling and exchanging wishes and even hallucinations that what happened yesterday can happen again today, just like it happened yesterday. They should perish the thought. That kind of tomorrow never comes. It is not coming. He has gone on to explain his views, and it's basically that there will be no change in Zimbabwe without Zanu PF continuity. New leaders with new ideas will come from Zanu PF. This is the kind of bullshit that Zanu PF subjected the people of Zimbabwe in 1980. Then the nation was told that if Zanu PF does not win the 1980 elections, the Bush War would continue. And the people fell for it. They voted to end the Bush War. And as soon as Zanu PF had their legs under the desk, they were off at a tangent, planning their next war. And now they had the command of the state institutions to carry out the party's dirty wishes. They launched the 1983 to 1987 Gukuraundi massacre. This was a war waged on PF ZAPU leaders and their supporters, force PF ZAPU leaders to give up their claim of being an independent political party, because that was the only party that posed serious political challenge to Zanu PF's continued rule. The late Dr. Joshua Nkomo relented in 1987 and signed the PF ZAPU Zanu PF Unity Accords, which merged the two parties to form Zanu PF. It cleared the way for Mugabe and his cronies to impose the de facto one-party state that has ruled the country to this day. The mentality of the leadership that emerged out of it was that Zanu PF had the right to govern the country. And so they corrupted and brainwashed all the key players in all the country's key institutions, the army, the police, the CIO, the judiciary, into subscribing to that notion that only Zanu PF leaders have the divine right to rule Zimbabwe. The same notion that our friend, Professor Jonathan Moyo, is peddling today. So it was no surprise that you had senior members of the army, the police, endorsing the idea that only Zanu PF leaders can rule the country. Here is one such leader.
We wish to make it very clear to all Zimbabwean citizens that the security organization will only stand in support of those political leaders that will pursue Zimbabwe's value, traditions, belief, for which thousands of lives were lost in pursuit of Zimbabwe's hard-won independence, sovereignty, territorial integrity, and the national interest. To this end, let it be known that the highest office on the land is a straitjacket, whose occupant is expected to observe the objectives of the liberation struggle. We will therefore not accept, let alone support or salute anyone with a different agenda that threatens the very existence of our sovereignty, our country, and our people. By the two crucial values, the first and most important, any report and action designed to create instability in Zimbabwe will be made by full force of law. All should be accountable for their actions. Security organizations have resolved.
The truth of the matter is that mentality is what has created this concept that Zanu PF leaders are the only ones who are fit to govern the country. Of course, it is a lie. Zimbabwe is not the only country that has gained its independence as a result of the protracted armed struggle. Other countries have done it. Last year, South Africa held their elections. It was heartening to hear the Commissioner of Police telling his staff that as much as they've got the right to support a political party of their own choice, while they're wearing the uniform, they save all South Africans. And they are there to maintain the rule of law. It is their duty to enforce the rule of law and maintain the peace. If somebody should try to break the peace during the elections, it doesn't matter which political party he or she belongs to. The police duty will be to arrest that individual and maintain peace and order in the country. This is at odds with what our police commissioners have been wittering all these years. One of the police commissioners, Augustine Chiwuri, he wrote a doctorate, and it is based on the concept that the police's biggest challenge after independence was to make sure that they did not allow those with a regime change agenda to disturb the country's peace. Regime change in this case meant they are the opposition. If you belong to the opposition in Zimbabwe, you are a criminal. And the police took it upon themselves to make sure that you are harassed, arrested, and many of them thrown in jail. This is the mentality we are facing today. This is the mentality we have faced for the last 45 years. A regime that believes that they and they alone have the divine right to rule the country. The very fact that after 45 years, with the country's economy in a mess and in a political paralysis, because they've stifled all meaningful debate and democratic discourse, Zanu PF still maintains that they are the only ones. We've got the leaders with new ideas to define what is going to happen in Zimbabwe. I think this is the time when the people of Zimbabwe should realize that in 1980, they made a mistake. When Zanu PF started making the noises of the Bush war would continue if Zanu PF does not win the elections, it should have set alarm bells ringing in the people's minds. Because what the people should have realized then is that these people are going to ride roughshod over their most fundamental right, a meaningful say in the governance of the country. The thing with tyrants is that if you give in to appease them, they'll come ask for an inch. And if you give in to appease them, they will not take an inch, they'll take 2 inches. And you can bet tomorrow they'll be back. This time, they'll be asking for a foot. You give them a foot, they'll take 3 feet. And a few days later, they are back again. They always be asking for more. And the more you give them, the more helpless you become, powerless you become. So the lesson there that the people of Zimbabwe should have learned is that if somebody asks you for your fundamental right, like meaningful say in the governance of the country, he cannot be a friend. He can only be a tyrant. And if you compromise on your exercise of that right today, tomorrow they will ask you to give up a few of those rights to the point where your right has been watered down to the point where it is useless to you. And that is exactly what has happened here. After 45 years of rigged elections, the country in serious economic trouble, the one and most important lesson the people of Zimbabwe have to accept is that Zanu PF is not the solution. Zanu PF, all they want to do is have power and allow them to exercise that power as they see wish, as they see fit. The G40 guys were booted out of office at the tail end of the 2017 coup. The coup plotters told the country that these were the criminals who were responsible for the corruption and mismanagement that had destroyed the economy. The people accepted that. They didn't have a choice on who was to take over. Zanu PF imposed Mnangagwa. But after 8 years, it was clear that Mnangagwa and his crew, they too did not have a clue how to end the mismanagement and corruption. And indeed, during those 8 years, they too failed to hold free, fair, and credible elections, thus denying the people a meaningful say in the governance of the country. And we are now in a situation where we accept Mnangagwa and company have failed. And we find ourselves in a situation where the First Republic, those G40 were rejected in 2017, are coming back and saying we are the only ones. We should decide what happens. Because only a Zanu PF faction can rule the country. Since the Second Republic faction has failed, you must accept the regenerated First Republic leaders. I say no. I say the people of Zimbabwe should stand firm and refuse to accept the imposition of these failed leaders. The original values and principles of the armed struggle was to create a Zimbabwe in which all Zimbabweans have a meaningful say in the governance of the country. One man, one vote was at the heart of it. This whole idea that somehow Zimbabwe's Zanu PF, because they were the party that led the armed struggle, have the veto on who governs the country is at the heart of this debate. Just as the bullshit that Zanu PF had the right to continue the Bush War if they didn't win the 1980 elections. This is a fight we, the people of Zimbabwe, lost in 1980 and have paid dearly for these last 45 years. It has come around. We are having the same fight all over again. This time, we must stand our ground. What is the way forward? Some people have often asked. In my view, the way forward is that we should have a government of national unity or transition government, call it what you like, in which Zimbabweans who now understand what this whole issue of implementing reforms is all about are selected to head that institution. I will quickly add that those Zanu PF leaders and opposition leaders, MDC, CCC, must be excluded from that institution for the simple reason that they were involved in the 2008 to 2013 GNU. They failed to implement even one token reform. To think that they will do any better now is absurd. Why didn't they do so then? They even had SADC to back them. This nation can finally break and claim its rightful position in the commune of nations and break its links with Zanu PF. Zanu PF has held this nation to ransom for the last 45 years. The more the people have given to Zanu PF's demands, the weaker the people have become, the helpless they've become, the poorer they've become. It's time to end that cycle. You don't have to take a gun to challenge the present status quo. One of the things that has got to emerge, whichever way, be it Mnangagwa is forced to resign, even if he doesn't resign, he has got to participate in the 2028 elections. The people of Zimbabwe should be smart enough not to participate in those flawed elections without reform. SADC and the AU have already done the nation a big favor. They have condemned the 2023 elections. And Mnangagwa knows that rigging the elections is tough enough. Getting away with it, this time with both SADC and the AU having condemned the process, is going to be even tougher. Particularly if the people, ordinary people of Zimbabwe, refuse to participate in the flawed elections. In 2023, nearly 2 million Chamisa supporters participated because they were foolish enough to believe Chamisa's lie that he had plugged all the vote-rigging loopholes. He wanted them to participate to give Zanu PF legitimacy. We should not fall for that. If there was ever a time when the people of Zimbabwe had to put on their thinking cap, this is the time. There will be no change in Zimbabwe without Zanu PF continuity. I think there will be change in Zimbabwe. The only change that counts will only happen without Zanu PF continuity. That is the message. Thank you very much. Have a good night.